Hey everyone, I'm Peter Bear and welcome to today's episode of the Independent School Moonshot podcast. Today I'm joined by Madison Carr. She's the creative director at Creative Chameleon Studio. Madison, I think, read something that I posted on LinkedIn, or I can't exactly remember how we got connected, but I'm so glad we did because we got on a Zoom not long ago and got talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is brand and brand identity. It's something that I've done a lot of work with over the years, and I think is actually a really important component to the business model and business competencies that I talk about, marketing being one of the business competencies. So I thought, let's bring Madison on, and we're going to kind of link brand to business sustainability and have what I know is going to be a great conversation. So Madison Carr, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Hey, before we get going, tell us a little bit about your journey with Creative Chameleon Studio, and how did you, I'm super curious, how did you become focused on branding for independent schools?
Absolutely. I've been a designer for, I think, going over 7 years now, and as many designers do, for the first few years, I did it all. You know, any client that came to me, I would work with. I focused on branding, but also dabbled in all things design, print, packaging, website. But then a few years ago, I truly stumbled upon an independent school that needed help with their branding. And as I started to work with them, I realized just how much branding helped them in a growing competitive field. And it made me really interested in the industry of private schools. And that led to another school project and another. And about a year of doing that, I decided it's time to niche down. It's time to put all my focus on that. And since then, I've been focusing on working exclusively with schools to help them with brand strategy and with their identity design.
Yeah, and your work is phenomenal. Like when I went through your portfolio, it really, and I love, if folks have a chance, go look at Madison's website because just the brand evolution that you're able to visualize, I think is really clever and cool, and it shows the power of brand. But like, let's level set. I think there are lots of different definitions of brand. Well, how would you define brand as it relates to an independent school?
Yes, there are many definitions. So it's something I regularly talk about to get people on the right page. When I talk about branding with schools, it's thought about in two ways. There's two elements of branding. Branding itself, very simply, is just the perception people have of your organization, of your business. But how that actually impacts things, it happens in two ways. You have brand strategy. That's the behind-the-scenes thinking. A punchy phrase I use for that is brand strategy is internal alignment for external influence. So it's getting everyone on the inside on the same page so you can have a cohesive effort to influence people on the outside of your school. That's one section of branding. The other is something we're more familiar with, which is identity design. So it's the way you look. And we know that the way you look does impact people's perception of you, but that has to be built on all that strategy thinking. So when I do branding with schools, it's that two-pronged approach of brand strategy and identity design.
Well, so what are now that you've been working with schools for a bit now and you've got a growing portfolio, like what are some of the common challenges that you see when schools are thinking about brand?
Yeah, I see common ones in both those areas. On the brand strategy side, a very common pain point I see is that lack of unity. And it's understandable how it happens. You have a lot of moving parts within a school. Even small schools have a lot of people on their teams, a lot of staff, a lot of decision makers, and a lack of unity in the vision of the school is a really big pain point for them. And I think a reason that happens is, school life is busy. There's a lot of things to juggle. There's a lot of things on your plate. And a lot of school administrators just, they get caught in the grind of running a school. And then there starts to be all these different visions of who is a school really? Who are we serving? How are we different from other schools? Everyone has different thoughts on that. And there's not a cohesive effort to be on the same page because everyone's caught up in their job and what they need to do. So brand strategy, going through that process, that addresses the main pain point of we all have different ideas here. So how do we get on the same page? And then with the identity design side of things, a common problem I see is just a lot of schools start when they're small. They start with the DIY approach of their logo and their designs, and it works for a little bit as they grow, but they hit a point where they no longer look the part. They no longer look like an established professional school, and that does affect people's perception of them. So that's a very common pain point, is how can we make the quality on the outside match the quality inside the school?
There are a couple things that I want to follow up with. So I really appreciate how you talked about, running a school is extraordinarily busy, lots going on. If you're, depending on your role, you have a very distinct perspective on the school, right? Like if you're in the classroom, you're thinking solely about it from the classroom or not solely, but largely from the classroom perspective. If you're a fundraiser, you're thinking about the school from like, how do I raise dollars to support our organization? So I love how you're basically saying we got to level set. We've got to bring everybody together and create and take what is our vision, which, hopefully most schools have that vision, and then think about it holistically so that everybody understands or creates a shared understanding, right? That folks are thinking about it like together versus separately. So here's the big question, like, how do you do that?
Well, that is a big question. That's the $1 million question. And I think there's a reason I always do the design work after I do strategy work with schools, is because the best design is built on good strategy. And when I bring schools in and we start doing strategy workshops, the very first thing we always do is that direction setting. It's that big picture goal, and it's getting people to really think long-term, where do we want our school to be? And that exercise alone starts to really identify where is there disconnect among our decision makers and where are opportunities of growth, where can we capitalize on things. And that's something that is, in the end, is completely tailored to the school, but the process stays the same, right? It's that setting the true north, because in the end, when I hand schools a 50+ page document of strategy, that is a roadmap. And to have a map, you need to know where you're going. So we always start with that, find the true north. And that's usually done in 3 primary ways. We look at vision statements, mission statements, and then we look at core attributes. So what are the defining traits of the school? And once we have that, then that becomes the groundwork for all the other business things when you think about, like, our ideal students, our competitors, our tone of voice, that kind of stuff. But it starts with that, finding the true north for that school.
Yeah, that makes loads of sense to me. And when we were talking before today, you made this like really fascinating link between school branding and financial sustainability, and how you talk to leaders about why that kind of business perspective is important. And clearly that's like near and dear to my heart, but can you share that? Because I just loved how you framed it.
Yeah, that's something that when I work with schools, usually the people that first reach out to me is the people who are feeling the pain points. They're the ones handling the brand. So it's marketing directors, admissions directors, director of advancement. Those are the people that if the brand is lacking cohesion, if their design is not up to snuff, they're the ones feeling that in their day-to-day. So they're usually the ones that are driving the let's get our brand under control discussion. But a very important part of the decision-making team we assemble for doing strategy work is head of schools and principals. They are the captain of the ship, so we need them on board. And they tend to be a bit removed from those pain points of having a bad brand. So that's a discussion I have early on, is getting everyone on the same page of why does a brand matter? And it really does come down to good brand translates into better tuition, better enrollments, all those kind of things, because you're selling a product. At the end of the day, you're selling a product. And I think we both know that most educators get into it because they have a passion for education, for kids. But if you want to accomplish that goal, you need to have students come through the door. And the way to get students come through the door is that the parents need to trust that you can deliver a product. And branding is the pillars of that journey. And if for all these different reasons, bad strategy, bad visuals, all these things, if that's in play, any prospective family that comes to you, even from a distance, they'll be able to say, I'm not sure if I trust this school to deliver a good quality product. So there's a lot of missed opportunity if your brand is not high quality and it's not saying the right things, if it's not building the right perception, not influencing in the right way. So when I talk with heads of schools about that, that's when they start to understand, okay, we do need to get our brand on the right track, because it does influence the entire journey of prospective families walking through the door and making a decision in the end. So that starts to connect what we do for branding, how it translates into dollars and cents, because it does.
What I appreciate about what you just said is, a good brand allows a customer, in our case, families who are, considering your school, to self-identify, to be able to feel like, oh, there's a connection there. And that's supported by, good storytelling and all sorts of things. But, especially in today's, change, as demographics are changing, as generational, as parents are changing generations, right? As we're seeing more millennials and Gen Z, these sorts of attributes are super, they've always been important, but I think, that value connection is even more. And if you can convey your values through your brand, it makes it easier for folks to be able to identify with each other. Do you talk about that? And is that something that schools are thinking about? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's something that schools, I think, are starting to get caught up on, and realizing that we've had two major shifts in the last few years. One is in the wake of the pandemic, we've seen a massive shift towards school choice. So on a state level, but also on a global level, we've seen that where school choice is becoming a very, very hot topic. So when that happens, the competition increases. And that's going to only continue to increase. Then we're also seeing that generational shift. And that also means that how consumers make choices is changing. So it's no longer an assumption that you're going to go to the school that's closest to your house. It's all our assumption that there's going to be one neighborhood school that all the kids go to. There's other choices, not just in the vein of there's choices of different private schools or different public schools, but there's alternative choices, homeschooling, micro schools, online schools. So as choices increase, those competition and the consumer journey changes then, and how the families look for schools change. So you can no longer bank on just being the closest school. You can no longer bank on being the most affordable school. You need to consider these factors, which means you understand who you're trying to target and how you speak to them, how you reach them, and where they're looking. Google search, your website matters more than ever now. Even the physical appearance of your school matters a lot more than it used to. So all those things are playing into the idea of branding becoming more and more valuable for schools.
Yeah, I love how you talked about choice, right? We really are in this era of choice, and you said it, right? It's not just the independent school down the street, but it's the public school, it's the charter school, it's the online school, it's the micro school, it's homeschool. And 15 years ago, most of this stuff didn't exist, and now it's just prevalent. And so that does necessitate being more competitive and brand leaning into that. And I think you touched a little bit on that just now, but what else could you say about how schools could be differentiating themselves in this competitive world that we live in now through good brand?
Yeah, a big thing I focus on when working through the strategy process with schools is there's storytelling matters a lot. You're not just selling the fact that you're giving the kids a passable education. You need to sell the portrait of your graduate. You need to say to the parents that come in, here's the journey your kids will go on if you stick with us for the duration of their school years, and here's the outcome that we're going to promise you. It's more than just a degree. It's all these other things that parents are really caring about. And it varies depending on who you're reaching, but things like transparency, that's a very big thing for schools right now. Is, are you actually selling that as a value point? Things like extracurricular opportunities, pathways to college. those kind of things, you're selling more than just a degree or diploma in the end. You are selling this portrait of a graduate, and the schools need to understand how to position that well, because all the options that are before families, fundamentally, they promise the same thing. We promise we're going to educate your kid, but it's the how that matters, because parents have different views on how that should happen and what should be included in that. So a school needs to understand what they are actually promising beyond just we're educating your kid. They need to be able to position those things properly, and then position them in comparison to the other choices the family is facing. And that all comes through the vein of storytelling, brand voice, visuals, personality, all the different avenues of branding go through that, that really speak to the parents and say, this is that holistic package we're selling.
So I think we established why brand is really important. What I'm curious now about it is you just provided a great overview about why like schools need to be thinking about this from a competitive standpoint, from a financial sustainability standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint, like all these like mission critical reasons. So when you're looking at brands right now in the, across independent schools, private schools, like what elements do you see that they're missing? Like like when you're working with something, like, do you see stuff that just right off the bat, like, that was overlooked. I wish they thought about this.
Yeah, I will say it's a bit of a broad stroke, but just general quality of the brand is something that I see. The lack of cohesive visuals, and with the visuals, with the design side of things, sometimes it can be hard to quantify why that's valuable. A school might say, we had the same logo for 50 years. It's worked so far. Why change it? But if it's not a great logo, it's not reflective of who they are. They might not be able to see how it's actually working against them. And that's something I see with a lot of schools is, and because we're in that period of time where the consumer is changing, the consumer journey is changing, a lot of schools are having to get caught up on why having a good visual representation of their school matters. And something that I've seen being a really big additive value of having a really polished professional identity design is it boosts school spirit. And that can be kind of hard to quantify, like how do you translate that into dollars? But what it really does is it gets people excited to represent their school. And that matters so much because when people are proudly representing their school, both staff and families, it exudes a sense of trust. And trust is currency when it comes to branding. So when families are looking for a school in their area, in their community, see and hear people talk about their school with such pride and such like invigorated school spirit, and they're happy to represent the school and wear their colors and wear their logo, and it looks good. That says so much about the school, even before interested families approach that school. So that to me is something that I'm seeing a lot of schools start to understand. Our outdated, unpolished identity is working against us. We're missing a lot of opportunity to take hold of that and invigorate school spirit within our school.
I love that. And, I've got my daughter is a senior, so we're deep into the college process right now. And I can't I don't know, I've been into a lot of colleges in the last 6 months, a lot of campus tours. And the thing that I'm always looking for are two things. One are like the kids smiling, right? Like, do they seem happy? And you'd be surprised. Like, it's pretty easy to see smiling kids versus not. But then I also like, are they representing the school? Are they wearing the swag? Like, do they have the cool sweatshirts? And, so many of these schools, like they have it dialed in, right? And I've spent a lot of money on sweatshirts over the last 6 months, as we've gone to these schools. And, now that we're getting closer to understanding, where she's going to end up, I'm like, all right, well, I kind of hope she goes here because I think that sweatshirt is awesome.
Cool
I'm just kidding. But like, I would be psyched to wear it because it looks really, really cool. So I love how you just make I just think that makes a lot of sense. You want to feel prideful when you wear something. And I think brand certainly plays into that.
Yeah.
Hey, so when you're starting a project, like I like to get prescriptive on this podcast so that, what are some things that people can do today? And when you think about starting a branding project with a school, like what are some of the first things what's the first step that you take with them to help the school identify their identity and mission are really well reflected?
Yeah. The process it always starts with assembling the right team. And that's a conversation I always have early on with clients. I've learned very quickly when it comes to schools, it can be hard to move away from the decision by committee approach. Schools are very used to that, of having a lot of people have their voices heard. But we start by saying who really should be in the room, and that always covers two areas. One, whose vision matters for the school. So head of school, principal, they're going to be in there. And then also who is interacting with the brand the most, who is the one producing that collateral, making those decisions in the day-to-day. So marketing directors, heads of missions. We start by looking at that and say, we want a small team, but we want a potent team. And we want to make sure we are giving the right weight to the voices that we have. So that is always, I usually say we want to land between 3 and 7 people. Any less than 3, you're not getting the right holistic view of the school. Any more than 7, we have too many cooks in the kitchen. So we aim for that. And once we have our team assembled, then it really starts with just surveying the landscape and saying, let's create an environment in which everyone can start to share their vision of things and how they think things are going. And then I'm there to facilitate. And it's helpful to have an outside voice. I'm a bit of a lightning rod in some scenarios of I'm the one that kind of points out where there's disconnects. And I help kind of guide things to the right place. But it starts with just understanding, are we on the same page? If we're not, in what areas are we not on the same page? And I've seen, some schools, they have their vision statement, they have their mission statement. But as we start to walk through it, we start to realize that it's maybe not quite right. Maybe the words we use are vastly understood differently among people. Or maybe there's just, it's too bogged down with words. Maybe it's not punchy enough. Maybe it doesn't capture the heart of what we're thinking. So we start with that's surveying the land, and identifying all those broken areas. And that helps set the stage for then as we go through the process, we know what to address. I'm a big believer of if it's not broke, don't fix it. So if things are working for them, we want to keep those things. A brand strategy development is not saying we're throwing everything out and starting fresh. It says we're going to look at what's working and what's not working, or want to fix what's not working. So that initial part of getting the leadership team, we pick that roster, we get the A team on board, and then we start to identify and say where are things broken, and then how can we go about fixing them. So it's kind of crucial first step because everything is built off of that.
It's kind of like an audit, like you're auditing what you got. Yeah,
absolutely.
Hey, so last question, and if somebody's listening and saying, oh my gosh, I want to strengthen a brand, like this is resonating, like it's clicking in my head, but maybe they're not sure where to start. Like, what's one actionable piece of advice that you can offer them?
Yeah, something I always encourage people to do, even before we do strategy workshops, is start conversations with their staff. And I advocate for pick one question and ask everyone in your staff that question. See if you get the same answer. And it can be really simple of define our school in 3 words. And ask that same question to everyone in your staff. If people can't answer the question or you're getting different answers, that really points to you have misalignment. If you can't answer it yourself in a very compelling, winsome way, it means you have misalignment. I think that little exercise, it's a great catalyst to people getting in the right mindset of we need to align our brand properly. And here's why, because we're seeing this disconnect even among our staff. So you can only imagine how your school body and the public feels then. So that I always say is that's what anyone can do. Shoot an email to your staff, give them a question, say, describe our school in 3 words, and go through those answers and see what it turns up. I think if you're feeling like maybe your brand isn't strong, you're going to start, if you start looking for cohesion and where things are disconnected, you'll start getting those indicators of your instinct is right, that it's a little off. And that's a great motive to then start engaging in this idea of developing your strategy and identity.
Madison Carr, Creative Director, Creative Chameleon Studio. Thanks for coming on the show, talking about one of my favorite subjects, brand. And, there's just a lot that you offered here. And I hope folks, find it valuable. I know they'll find it valuable. But here's the last, I do have one more question. If somebody wants to reach out, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Absolutely. I'm quite active on LinkedIn under Madison Carr, or you can go right to my website, creativechameleonstudio.com. There I have case studies. You can contact me directly. I have some free resources that are helpful for kickstarting that thinking about strategy and design. And you can shoot me a message to my website, and I'm always happy to talk with people about branding.
Fantastic, Madison. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.